Ian White, you are one of the UK's leading estate agency consultants. What is your opinion on regulation and licensing for estate agency? Talk to me.
I think the point of entry into a state agency is way, way too low. I think we've gone way past the point where you
And
should,
do you include lettings in that as well?
probably more so. I think there's even more legislation and more complication in the letting space than a state agency space. But, I've seen lots of businesses that, couples that have gone for a lifestyle change, they've gone to a franchise fair, picked up a franchise, and they didn't know they were going to go and get an estate agency franchise. That's just what they came away with instead of a beef burger franchise. And they are perfectly educated people, but they have no understanding. So in that case, I think it's unfair on them because I think they're putting their families, financial well-being and spiritual well-being in the hands of an industry that's probably just going to eat them for breakfast, if we're honest about it, and it's going to cost them a lot of money, and they're going to, you can't just put up estate agents above the door and expect to be profitable within a few days. That's just not reality. So I think there needs to be an understanding of exactly what needs to go in to build an estate agency before you can have a franchise, and then I think we should be very, very strict and very, very definite about the behaviours that estate agents need to adhere to. And I think there needs to be legislation to massively simplify the conveyancing process. I think if we could do all of those things, I'd die a happy man and retire tomorrow.
I think you've mentioned franchising. At least with franchising, you get a bit of training. The amount of phone calls I get from, especially letting agents, saying, I rent out my uncle's houses and now I'm going to set up a letting agency. And we're dealing with people's lives here, with gas safety certificates, and you get the serve the wrong notice, you're going to have tenants in there forever. If not, it's shocking that there's the low barrier to entry.
It's scary, I think, yeah. So, particularly as now rentals is, when I started in the industry, I don't know, rentals was probably 2-3% of the.
Do you think regulation could go the other way and go too far?
Yes, of course I do. I think regulation can be prohibitive in many ways. Unintended consequences are nearly always an issue around all sorts of legislation or law changes. The tenant fee ban. It was pretty obvious the industry knew that an unintended consequence of that is that the tenants would pay for it through the rent. Well, I think the evidence is overwhelming now that's what's happened. So there's been a whole lot of money spent on consultations and all this sort of stuff, and actually I reckon the tenants are worse off. In addition to which, there's probably less property for them to choose from, and therefore there's more issues with people actually finding a place to live. So now that's not legislation as such; that's just a change in the law, but it's in that space.
Is it the job of Arla and the ANEA to sort that out, or is it the job of everyone's to take responsibility and make sure that the legislation and the is sorted out, the regulation is sorted out correctly for the industry to even the balance out? I mean, we've even got Section 21, which by the time this video's come out probably has been and gone, probably being knocked on the head. So what responsibility do agents have to ensure that it doesn't go too far?
Well, look, I think the first responsibility they have is to do it properly in the first place. Intervention normally comes around as a result. Let's look at the tenant fee ban. The tenant fee ban came in not because 90% of estate agents were doing it perfectly okay, but there was probably 5 or 10% that were abusing it and monetising it and holding people to ransom over it. So, the industry clearly has a responsibility not to push itself into a place where there is a need for legislation. However, there has to be some rules and boundaries in order to create a professionalism around the industry. So, we must be one of the only countries in the modern world where there isn't licensing for estate agents. And I'm sure if agents were licensed, they'd be able to charge higher fees. They'd be respected more within the communities. We could attract better people. But of course, that licensing has to be done and accountable and have teeth.
Yes, because it's all very good having laws if you're not going to follow them up and make people accountable. There's no point in having the law.
Or that the laws are the correct ones and they have thought through and that they've involved the right people. I've often thought with the housing, I can't understand why they haven't invited certain people in to consult with them, because government doesn't know anything about our marketplace. They have no.
Kevin Hollingworth is there now, bless him, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, Kevin obviously does, and that's great. But there are some really good thought leaders in our space that I would have thought could allow them to avoid the unintended consequences, but still make legislative change, certain responsibilities on the industry to ensure that tenants, landlords, buyers, sellers, and everybody gets a fair, proper deal, and that house, the housing crisis and all that sort of stuff. But it's a very tricky situation, because it almost feels like every intervention that we've had has just created a consequence that was greater than the problem they were trying to solve. So part of you just thinks, we'll just leave it alone in terms of legislation. But I do think that we have an awful lot of work to do to bring the profession back up to a point where something has to be done. I mean, it's simple to me. There needs to be licensing of some sort, but it needs to be done properly. It needs to be thought through, and they need to involve people from within the industry before they leap. Arla and those people, I'm sure that they would have a space in it, but don't appear to have enough teeth. And probably, dare I say it, they won't like me for it, I think they represent the establishment, the old end of a state agency. I don't think they represent the people that have started in the last 5 or 10 years. I don't think are really represented by some of the incumbent bodies.
Only time will tell. Thank you very much.
Cheers.